Tuesday morning started like any other for Nathan Harper. The aroma of premium Colombian coffee lingered in the air of his top-floor office. Mixing with the subtle scent of Italian leather from the armchairs, his fingers glided across the tablet, analyzing financial reports that, once again, showed the exponential growth of his hotel empire. At 38, Nathan had built something few men could dream of. A billion-dollar fortune in luxury hotels scattered across 5 continents. But that morning, something was wrong. The dizziness hit him without warning, forcing him to lean against the mahogany desk. The world spun for a few seconds, and a strange sensation of weakness took over his legs. Nathan took a deep breath, trying to ignore the symptom, as he had done for the past few weeks. After all, men like him didn't have time for weakness, just stress, he murmured to himself, adjusting his Italian silk tie. But his body didn't lie. Over the following 3 weeks, the episodes intensified. The fatigue he once attributed to long workdays now accompanied him from the moment he opened his eyes. His hands, always steady during million-dollar negotiations, began to tremble subtly when he signed important contracts. It was Simon, his personal assistant for over a decade, who finally confronted him. "Mr. Harper, with all due respect, you need to see a doctor today." Nathan looked at Simon through his gold-framed glasses, noticing for the first time the genuine concern in the eyes of the man who knew his habits better than anyone. "I'm fine, Simon. Just know you're not." The interruption was firm, something rare coming from Simon. "Yesterday, you almost fainted during the Tokyo video conference, and don't think I didn't notice how your hands shook during the Riverside contract signing." Silence hung heavy between them. Nathan knew Simon was right, but admitting weakness had never been an option in his vocabulary. Men like him didn't show vulnerability. That's how they built empires and maintained respect. 2 hours later, Nathan was in Dr. Edward Sterling's office, his personal physician for over 15 years. The familiar environment, dark, wood-paneled walls, framed diplomas, and the discreet scent of antiseptic somehow made everything more real and frightening. "Nathan, I need to be direct with you." "Doctor." Sterling held a folder of test results, his eyes avoiding direct contact. "The results aren't good. In fact, they're devastating." Nathan's heart raced, but his expression remained impassive. Years of negotiations had taught him to maintain control even when the world was crumbling around him. "Go on. You have a rare degenerative disease. It's progressive, with no known cure." The doctor's voice was gentle, but each word cut like a sharp blade. "Based on the current stage and the progression we're observing, I'd say you have 3 years at most." Time stopped. Nathan felt as if he were watching the scene from outside his own body. He saw himself there, sitting in the leather chair, receiving a death sentence, as if it were just another business report. But inside, something was shattering. 3 years, he repeated, his voice strangely calm. "Maybe less. The disease is unpredictable. Some patients deteriorate rapidly. Others manage to maintain some quality of life longer." "Doctor." Sterling left the sentence hanging, the weight of unspoken words filling the silence. Nathan nodded slowly, processing the information as he would any important business data. But this time, the numbers weren't about profits or losses. They were about his very existence. "There are treatments to slow the progression, therapies that can help with symptoms, but I need to be honest. This is palliative, not curative." When he finally left the office, Nathan walked through Manhattan streets like a man in a trance. The noise of the city cars, people, construction, seemed muffled, as if he were hearing everything through a glass wall. His legs automatically carried him to Central Park, where he sat on an isolated bench. It was there, surrounded by the pulsing life of the city he had conquered, that reality finally hit him full force. He was dying, and for the first time in his adult life, Nathan Harper cried not for the businesses he would leave behind, nor for the hotels that took years to build. He cried for the absolute loneliness that surrounded him. At 38, he had built an empire but didn't have a single person to share his final moments with. He had no children to carry on his legacy, no wife to hold his hand, nothing but money and empty properties. The irony was cruel. The man who had everything discovered that, in reality, he had nothing that truly mattered. When the sun began to set, painting Manhattan's sky with shades of orange and red, Nathan made a decision. He wouldn't simply waste away and die. If he had only 3 years, he would make them count. Somehow, he would find a way to leave something more than money behind. But exactly what, he still didn't know. The days following the diagnosis passed like a dense, suffocating fog. Nathan found himself lost in his own thoughts, gazing at Manhattan through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city continued its frenzied dance below, indifferent to the fact that one of its most powerful sons had received a death sentence. For 2 weeks, he canceled important meetings, ignored calls from international investors, and let Simon handle urgent matters. For the first time in his career, Nathan Harper couldn't focus on business. His mind was too busy processing a reality that seemed impossible to accept. It was on a rainy Thursday that a call from his lawyer, Thomas Bennett, brought him back to reality. "Nathan, we need to talk about your will. With the recent changes in your situation, it's crucial that we review everything." The word situation sounded like a cruel euphemism for imminent death. But Nathan appreciated Thomas's delicacy. "Schedule a meeting for this afternoon." 3 hours later, Thomas was sitting in the penthouse living room, documents spread across the Carrara marble coffee table. The lawyer, a 60-year-old man with graying hair and rimless glasses, had been handling the Harper family's legal affairs for over 2 decades. "As it's currently structured, 60% of your assets will go to your brother Caleb, 30% to selected charities, and 10% divided among long-term employees," Thomas explained, adjusting his glasses. Upon hearing his brother's name, Nathan felt a mixture of anger and disappointment rise in his throat. Caleb Harper, 3 years younger, had spent his entire life wasting opportunities and spending money he hadn't earned. Addicted to gambling, women, and drugs, Caleb represented everything Nathan despised: irresponsibility, weakness, and parasitism. "That needs to change," Nathan said, his voice loaded with determination. "Caleb won't see a single penny of what I built." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "I understand your concern, but legally, as your only direct relative, I don't care about legalities. Is there any way to ensure he inherits nothing?" "Well, if you had a child, a direct heir, that would completely change the legal situation." Thomas's words echoed in Nathan's mind, like a bell awakening him. An heir, a child, someone to carry not just his surname, but his values, his vision, his true legacy. That night, alone in his penthouse, Nathan paced the apartment like a caged lion. The idea had lodged itself in his mind, and grew with each passing minute. He needed an heir, but didn't have time for conventional methods. He didn't have years to find someone, fall in love, build a solid relationship, and start a family. He had 3 years, maybe less. That's when a radical idea began to take shape. If he couldn't do things the traditional way, he'd do it his way. Practical, direct, efficient. Like all his successful business deals. A contract, a mutually beneficial agreement. The next morning, Nathan called his private investigator, Michael Liu, a former NYPD detective who had been handling delicate matters for high-profile businessmen for years. "Michael, I need you to find someone for me. Someone specific." "What kind of person, Mr. Harper?" Nathan took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "A woman between 25 and 32 years old. Clean record, no addictions, no excessive debt. Someone in financial difficulties, but for noble reasons taking care of family, paying for education, something like that. I need someone with integrity, honest, who isn't just looking for easy money." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Michael had worked for Nathan long enough not to ask unnecessary questions, but the specificity of the request was unusual. "Any physical or professional preferences?" "Intelligence is fundamental, appearance attractive, but it's not the most important thing. I want someone real, Michael. Someone who works hard, who knows the value of things, who wasn't born with a silver spoon." "I understand. How much time do I have?" 1 week. While Michael worked, Nathan spent the days refining his plan. It wouldn't be just a cold, calculated financial agreement. It would be an honest proposal. He would offer absolute financial security in exchange for a child, and perhaps companionship during his final years. The right woman would understand it wasn't about romantic love, but about legacy, family, and purpose. During sleepless nights, Nathan found himself imagining what it would be like. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be completely alone. There would be someone there, someone real, someone who chose to be by his side, even knowing his condition. And later, when he was no longer there would be a child, his son or daughter, to continue what he had started. The idea comforted him in a way no business achievement ever had. On Friday, Michael called with news. "I found some interesting candidates, but there's one in particular I think will catch your attention. Sarah Thornton, 28 years old, works as a waitress in 2 shifts to support her younger sister. Business administration graduate, but can't get a job in the field due to lack of connections. Impeccable record. Never got into trouble. Never begged for anything. She's the type of person who'd rather work 16 hours a day than accept charity. Nathan felt something stir in his chest. Where does she work? One of her shifts is at the Meridian Hotel in Charleston. Ironically, one of your hotels, fate, Nathan thought, sometimes had a peculiar sense of humor. Prepare a complete file on her. I want to know everything. As he hung up the phone, Nathan looked out the window at the city he had conquered. For the first time since the diagnosis, he felt something like hope growing in his chest. Maybe 3 years would be enough to build something truly important. Something that would last far beyond his own existence. The flight to Charleston had been turbulent, but nothing compared to the storm of emotions Nathan carried in his chest. 3 days had passed since he'd received the complete file on Sarah Thornton, and each page had only intensified his curiosity about the woman who could change the course of his life. Sarah Marie Thornton, 28 years old, orphaned at 16 when a car accident took her parents, leaving her responsible for Olivia, her sister, who was only 8 at the time. Graduated in business administration from the University of South Carolina on a full scholarship, but working as a waitress because companies wanted experience she couldn't gain while caring for a child. Never married, few serious relationships, she had dedicated her entire life to ensuring Olivia had all the opportunities she herself had lost. The Meridian Charleston was one of Nathan's crown jewels, a luxury boutique hotel located in the heart of the city's historic district. He had chosen that night for the annual charity event, a gala for orphaned children, an irony that didn't escape him because he knew Sarah would be working. Nathan arrived at the hotel 2 hours before the event, claiming he wanted to supervise the final preparations. In reality, he wanted to observe Sarah in her natural environment, to see if the real woman matched the image he'd built in his mind, based on reports and photographs. He saw her before she noticed him. Sarah was in the service area, checking the hors d'oeuvre trays with the meticulous attention of someone who understood that every detail mattered. She wore the hotel's standard uniform, an immaculate white shirt, a black skirt fitted to the knees, low-heeled black shoes, but there was something about her that made the uniform look elegant rather than merely functional. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a low bun, revealing the delicate line of her neck. She wasn't conventionally stunning like the socialites who frequented Nathan's events, but there was a natural beauty about her, a contained strength that showed through every calculated movement. Mr. Harper, the voice of the hotel manager, William Carter, interrupted his observations. We weren't expecting your visit today. Is there a problem? Just a routine check, William. I want to make sure everything's perfect for tonight. Nathan continued his informal inspection, keeping Sarah always in his field of vision. He observed how she interacted with other staff members, respectful but not submissive, helpful but not servile. When one of the other waiters dropped a tray of crystal glasses, Sarah was the first to help, kneeling on the floor to collect the shards without complaining or blaming the nervous colleague. Watch out for the glass, she said gently to the young man, who couldn't have been more than 19. It happens to all of us. I broke 3 trays my first week. That genuine kindness, combined with evident competence, confirmed for Nathan that his choice was right. The event began at 7:00 inches the evening. The Meridian's main ballroom was transformed. Golden lights created an intimate atmosphere. Lush floral arrangements decorated each table, and the soft sound of a string quartet filled the space. Charleston's elite had turned out in force, women in designer gowns and men in impeccable tuxedos, all eager to be seen supporting a noble cause. Nathan moved among the guests with the ease of someone born for that world, exchanging cordial greetings and discussing business casually, but his eyes constantly searched for Sarah among the waiters serving champagne and canapés. It was 45 minutes into the event when it happened. Sarah was moving gracefully among the guests with a tray of red wine when one of Nathan's most important investors, an obese and inconveniently drunk man named George Ramsey, decided to make an inappropriate joke with one of the other waitresses. Hey, sweetheart, Ramsey said too loudly, grabbing the young waitress's arm. How about you and I find a more private room after this? Sarah, who was just a few steps away, saw the obvious discomfort in her colleague's eyes and didn't hesitate. She approached quickly, positioning herself strategically between Ramsey and the other waitress. Sir, may I offer you some wine? We have an exceptional Bordeaux tonight, Sarah said with a professional smile, but Nathan could see the tension in her jaw. I don't want wine, sweetheart. I want you, Ramsey replied, trying to touch Sarah's face. It was at that moment that everything happened in slow motion. Sarah dodged his touch, but the sudden movement caused the wine tray to lose balance. 3 glasses of 2015 Bordeaux, worth $200 each, flew in a perfect trajectory toward Nathan, who had approached to intervene in the situation. The wine hit his Italian silk white shirt, spreading in red stains like blood across the immaculate fabric. Drops splashed on his tuxedo, staining his Hermes tie and spattering his face. The entire ballroom seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, laughter died on lips, and all eyes turned to the scene. Nathan Harper, the billionaire owner of the hotel, was drenched in red wine, courtesy of a waitress who was now pale as paper. I'm so sorry," Sarah stammered, her green eyes wide with horror. "Sir, it was an accident. I didn't." Nathan slowly wiped the wine from his face with his pocket handkerchief, his eyes never leaving hers. He expected to see fear, subservience, the typical panic of someone who had just made a mistake that could cost their job. Instead, after the initial shock, he saw something different in Sarah's eyes. Determination. She was scared, yes, but not broken. She was prepared to face the consequences of her actions, even if it meant defending someone weaker. "You did that for her," Nathan said softly, indicating the young waitress Sarah had protected. Sarah lifted her chin slightly, a spark of defiance shining in her eyes. "Yes, I did, even knowing it could cost you your job. Some things are more important than a job, sir." In that moment, something changed inside Nathan. It wasn't just physical attraction, though the fire in Sarah's green eyes and the way she maintained her dignity even in a humiliating situation definitely affected him. It was recognition. For the first time in years, he was looking at someone who understood that character was worth more than convenience. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah Thornton." "Sarah," he repeated, testing how the name sounded in his voice. "You just ruined a $1,000 shirt." Sarah's shoulders stiffened, preparing for the inevitable. "Yes, sir. I understand if you want to deduct it from my salary, or fire me." Nathan completely removed the ruined shirt, leaving only the white undershirt beneath. To everyone's surprise, then he did something that shocked the audience even more. He smiled a genuine smile, not the professional smile he reserved for business meetings. "Actually, Sarah Thornton," he said, his voice carrying a note of something that could be amusement. "I think you just did me a favor." And in that instant, with red wine still dripping from his tie and Sarah looking at him with a mixture of confusion and relief, Nathan knew he had found much more than a candidate for his plan. He had found someone who could change everything. The 3 days following the incident at the charity event were the longest of Sarah's life. She expected to be fired at any moment, imagining how she'd explain to Olivia that she lost her job for throwing wine on the hotel owner. Instead, William Carter had given her a paid week off, claiming orders from above with an enigmatic smile. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that Sarah's life changed forever. She was at home, a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest Charleston neighborhood, helping Olivia with her math homework when the doorbell rang. On the other side of the door was a well-dressed, professional-looking man holding a sealed envelope. "Sarah Thornton? I'm Thomas Bennett, attorney for Mr. Nathan Harper. He would like to speak with you today, if possible." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Is it about what happened at the hotel? I can pay for the shirt, even if I have to make payments." "It's not about that, Miss Thornton. Mr. Harper has a proposal for you. A business proposal." 2 hours later, Sarah was on the top floor of the Meridian in the presidential suite that Nathan used as an office during his stays in Charleston. The environment was luxurious but welcoming. Aged leather furniture, a spectacular view of the historic city, and a fireplace crackling softly. Nathan was standing near the window, hands in his pockets, wearing a gray cashmere sweater and black pants. When she entered, he turned, and Sarah had to admit he was even more attractive than she remembered. There was something in his dark eyes, an intensity that made her heart race inconveniently. "Sarah, thank you for coming," he said. "Mr. Harper," she replied, keeping her voice steady, though inside she was a bundle of nerves. "Your lawyer said you have a proposal for me. Please, sit down." Nathan indicated a leather armchair. "And call me Nathan. I think, after you bathe me in Bordeaux, we can skip the formalities." Despite the tension, Sarah felt the corners of her mouth curve slightly. "I still feel terrible about that." "You shouldn't. It was enlightening." Nathan sat in the opposite chair, leaning slightly forward. "Sarah, can I be direct with you?" I prefer it that way. I investigated you. The words fell like a stone into still water. Sarah felt her blood freeze in her veins. I know about Olivia, about your parents, about how you sacrificed your own ambitions to take care of her. I know you graduated with honors, but work as a waitress because you need flexible hours and immediate money. I know you sleep 4 hours a night to manage working 2 shifts and still help Olivia with her studies. Sarah stood up abruptly, her face flushed with indignation. I don't know what kind of sick game this is, but I'm not playing. What right do you have to investigate my life? The right of a desperate man. The raw honesty in Nathan's voice made her stop. He had also stood up, and there was something in his posture, vulnerability mixed with determination, that prevented her from walking out the door. Sarah, please, give me 5 minutes to explain. If after that you want to leave, I'll never bother you again. You have my word. She stared at him for long seconds, looking for signs of lies or manipulation. Instead, she saw something she didn't expect. Fear. Genuine fear from a man who clearly wasn't used to feeling afraid. 5 minutes, she said, sitting back down. Nathan took a deep breath, running his hands through his hair. 3 weeks ago, I found out I'm going to die. A rare degenerative disease. I have 3 years to live at most. Sarah felt as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. Whatever proposal she had expected, it wasn't this. I'm so sorry, she murmured. And she truly was. Thank you. But that's not why you're here. Nathan sat back down, resting his elbows on his knees. Sarah, I built an empire, but I have no one to leave it to. I have no real family, no children, no one who cares about me beyond what my money can buy. And what does that have to do with me? I need an heir, and you need financial security. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Sarah felt her heart race as she began to understand where the conversation was heading. What exactly are you proposing? Nathan stood up, walking to a desk where there was a folder of documents. Marriage. A 2-year contract, renewable if both parties agree. You would have my child, and in return, I guarantee that you and Olivia never worry about money again. Sarah stood up so quickly that the chair almost tipped over backward. You're crazy. Absolutely crazy. I'm being practical. Nathan turned to face her, his dark eyes intense. Sarah, I saw how you defended your colleague at the event. I saw your integrity, your strength, your compassion. You're not driven by greed. You're driven by love. Love for your sister. Willingness to sacrifice everything for her. Those are the qualities I want my child to inherit. You want to buy me? Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger and something else she couldn't identify. No, I want to partner with you. An honest partnership. Nathan took a step toward her, stopping when he saw Sarah back away. It wouldn't be a marriage of appearances. It would be real. Sarah, we'd live together, share a life. And I would take care of you for real for 2 years, until you die. Yes. The brutality of his honesty hit her like a punch to the stomach. Sarah stared at him, looking for signs that this was some kind of cruel prank. Instead, she saw a man who was offering everything he had in exchange for something money couldn't buy. A family. And if I say no, then you leave. And I find someone else. Just like that. Simple. Nathan returned to his chair but didn't sit. But before you answer, let me show you what I'm offering. He opened the folder and removed some documents. Olivia would finish at Charleston's most exclusive private school. College paid for anywhere she wants. You would have a monthly allowance of $50,000. A house, not an apartment. A real house and a trust fund of $5 million in your name after the child's birth. Sarah felt her legs weaken. These were numbers she had only seen in movies. What if I can't get pregnant? We'll try for 2 years. If it doesn't work, you still keep half of what I promised, and Olivia still gets her education guaranteed. What if you die before the 2 years? You inherit everything, the company, the properties, everything. Sarah walked to the window, looking down at the city she knew so well, but which suddenly seemed completely different. Below, people walked through the historic streets, living their simple, predictable lives. An hour ago, she was one of them. Now she was being offered the chance to change everything. Why me? She asked without turning around. Because when you threw that wine on me to defend your colleague, I saw something I hadn't seen in anyone for years. Genuine character. You didn't hesitate to risk your job for someone weaker. That's the kind of person I want my child to be. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling hot tears press against her eyelids. It was an offer impossible to refuse and impossible to accept at the same time. I need to think, she said finally. Of course, but Sarah. When she turned, Nathan was closer than she expected. His dark eyes fixed on hers. It wouldn't be just a cold business deal. I would care about you for real. And it was in that whispered promise, in the vulnerability he allowed her to see, that Sarah realized maybe this impossible decision wasn't so impossible after all. The decision had been made on a sleepless night, 3 days after Nathan's proposal. Sarah was sitting in the tiny kitchen of the apartment, watching Olivia sleep on the couch with a biology book open on her chest. At 20, her sister was brilliant, determined. But Sarah saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the exhaustion of someone who worked part-time while studying, because she knew every penny mattered. It was in that moment that Sarah realized she wasn't choosing just for herself. She was choosing for Olivia, for the future they both deserved. And maybe, just maybe, she was choosing for Nathan, too. There was something about that man, a deep loneliness that mirrored her own, that touched her in ways she couldn't explain. The call to Nathan at 6:0 the morning was brief. Yes, my answer is yes. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood before the mirror in one of Charleston's most exclusive private salons, adjusting the wedding dress she had chosen. It wasn't a little girl's dream dress. There was no voluminous tulle or dramatic train. Instead, she had chosen something elegant and simple. An ivory silk dress fitted to the body, with a subtle neckline and long sleeves of delicate lace. It was beautiful but understated, appropriate for a wedding that was more business transaction than fairy tale. Or at least that's what she tried to convince herself. "You look beautiful," Olivia said behind her, adjusting the simple, single-layer veil. In recent days, after Sarah explained the situation, carefully omitting the more intimate details of the agreement, Olivia had alternated between shock, concern, and cautious excitement about the changes to come. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? We can still walk out that door and go home." Sarah looked at her sister's reflection in the mirror. Olivia wore a navy blue dress that Nathan had insisted on buying, and she looked more beautiful than ever. But there was worry in her green eyes, the same eyes Sarah saw in the mirror every day. "I'm sure," Sarah replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Olivia, this is going to change our lives for the better. But do you like him, even just a little?" The question hit Sarah unexpectedly. In the 2 weeks since she'd accepted the proposal, she and Nathan had met several times to discuss practical details, where they would live, what daily life would be like, medical issues. But in all those meetings, there was an underlying tension, an attraction that neither mentioned but which was always present in the air between them. I respect him," Sarah said finally, "and that's more than many marriages have." 15 minutes later, Sarah was walking down the aisle of the small historic chapel, her steps echoing softly on the ancient marble. There were only 12 people present: Olivia, Thomas Bennett, Simon, Nathan's assistant, some close employees, and, surprisingly, Nathan's mother, Margaret Harper. Margaret was exactly as Sarah had imagined, a 62-year-old woman with perfectly arranged blonde hair, wearing a Chanel suit and a barely disguised expression of disapproval. Her cold eyes had analyzed Sarah from head to toe when they were introduced, and the conclusion clearly hadn't been favorable. But none of that mattered when Sarah saw Nathan waiting at the altar. He was devastatingly elegant in a tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair combed back, and when their eyes met, something contracted in Sarah's chest. There was nervousness there, but also something warmer, deeper admiration, perhaps, or something that could easily be mistaken for something more dangerous. When she reached the altar, Nathan extended his hand to her, and Sarah felt the strength and warmth of his fingers intertwined with hers. His voice was low, enough for only her to hear. When he whispered, "You look stunning." The ceremony was brief but intimate. The pastor, a gentleman with gray hair, conducted the traditional vows with a solemnity that made everything seem more real than Sarah expected. When it came time to exchange rings, Nathan slipped onto her finger a diamond and platinum ring that must have cost more than she made in a year, but which somehow seemed perfect on her hand. "With this ring, I marry you," Nathan said, his voice firm but loaded with emotion. "And I promise to care for you, protect you, and respect you, as long as we both shall live." When Sarah repeated the vows, placing the white gold band on Nathan's finger, she felt unexpected tears pressing against her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, she realized with surprise. They were tears of something she couldn't name: relief, perhaps, or hope. "You may kiss the bride," the pastor announced. For a moment, Nathan hesitated, his eyes searching hers as if asking permission. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly, and then he leaned in, his hands gently holding her face. The kiss was soft, respectful, but there was an underlying electric current that made Sarah's heart race. His lips were warm and firm, and when he pulled away, she could feel his breath against her skin. "Mrs. Harper," he murmured, a half-smile curving his lips. "Mr. Harper," she replied, surprised by how natural it sounded. The reception was small, held on the Meridian's private terrace. As the sun set over Charleston, Sarah found herself navigating polite conversations with people she never imagined meeting. Simon was kind and genuinely warm, clearly relieved to see Nathan happy. Thomas Bennett was professional but cordial. Margaret Harper, on the other hand, was a completely different story. "So, dear," Margaret said when she got Sarah alone, "I hope you understand this is just temporary. Nathan is going through a difficult time, but he'll get over this phase." Sarah felt fury rise in her throat but kept her voice calm. "With all due respect, Mrs. Harper, it's not a phase. It's a marriage. It's a mistake," Margaret replied coldly. "And when Nathan realizes that, I hope you're smart enough to disappear discreetly." Before Sarah could respond, a strong hand landed on her waist. Nathan had appeared beside her, his dark eyes fixed on his mother with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Fierce protection mixed with irritation. "Mother, I think it's time for you to go home," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Nathan, darling, I was just leaving," he interrupted. Now, after Margaret left, visibly offended, Nathan turned to Sarah, his hands still on her waist. "I'm sorry about that. She had no right to speak to you that way." "It's okay," Sarah lied, still feeling Margaret's poisonous words echoing in her mind. "No, it's not." Nathan moved closer, his voice low and intimate. "Sarah, you're my wife now. No one will disrespect you in my presence." The intensity in his voice made something stir in Sarah's chest. For the first time in years, someone was offering to protect her, to be on her side. Later, when the last guests left and Olivia was taken by Simon to spend the night at the hotel, giving the newlyweds privacy, Sarah found herself alone with Nathan in the presidential suite that was now temporarily her home. The suite had been transformed. There were candles scattered around the room, rose petals on the floor, and chilled champagne waiting on a silver table. It was romantic in a way that made Sarah's heart race and her defenses rise simultaneously. "You didn't need to do this," she said, indicating the romantic decoration. "I wanted to," Nathan replied simply. He had removed his jacket and tie, and with the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to his elbows, he looked younger, more accessible. "Sarah, I know this is strange for both of us, but I thought maybe we could try to make this pleasant." He poured champagne for both of them, his hands slightly trembling. Sarah realized with surprise that he was nervous, as nervous as she was. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Sarah echoed, touching her glass to his. The champagne was smooth and expensive, but Sarah barely noticed the taste. She was too busy watching Nathan, the way the candlelight danced in his dark eyes, how his mouth curved in a nervous half-smile. "So," she said, trying to break the tension growing between them, "what do we do now?" Nathan set his glass aside, taking a step toward her. "Now, Sarah Harper, we begin our life together." When he extended his hand to her, Sarah hesitated for only a second before accepting. Their fingers intertwined, and for the first time since accepting his impossible proposal, Sarah allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, this could become something real. The first days as Mrs. Harper passed in a surreal haze of changes. Sarah found herself living in Nathan's Manhattan penthouse, a two-story apartment with panoramic city views, decorated with modern art and furniture that cost more than her old house in Tite. Olivia had enrolled in Charleston's most prestigious private school, with all costs covered, and for the first time in years, Sarah didn't need to check her bank balance before buying groceries. But it was the small, unexpected moments that were slowly tearing down the barriers she had built around her heart. Like the morning she woke up and found Nathan in the kitchen, preparing coffee and scrambled eggs with the concentration of someone who clearly wasn't used to cooking for himself, let alone for another person. "I thought you had a chef," Sarah said, tying the silk robe he had insisted on buying for her. "I do, but I dismissed all the domestic staff for the week," Nathan replied, turning to her with an almost shy expression. "I thought you might want privacy, for us to get used to each other." There was something touching about his consideration, the way he tried to make this impossible situation more comfortable for her. Sarah approached, watching as he struggled with eggs that were clearly burning in the pan. "Here, let me help," she said, lightly touching his arm. The kitchen was large enough for 3 people, but somehow, when Sarah moved to stand beside Nathan at the stove, the space felt intimate. She could feel the heat emanating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely masculine and purely him. "Do you cook?" he asked, watching as she skillfully saved the eggs. "I've been cooking since I was 16. When you have to feed a teenager on a waitress's budget, you learn to be creative." "Teach me," Nathan said suddenly. Sarah looked at him, surprised. "What?" "Teach me to cook, at least the basics. If we're going to," he hesitated, the words hanging between them, "if we're going to share a life, I'd like to be able to take care of you sometimes." There was something vulnerable about his request, an admission that, despite all his wealth and power, there were simple things in life he had never learned. Sarah felt something soften inside her chest. "Okay," she said gently. "We can start with scrambled eggs that don't look like rubber." That's how their mornings began. Sarah teaching Nathan how to make decent coffee, how to properly season eggs, the difference between sautéing and frying. He was an attentive and surprisingly humble student, asking questions and accepting corrections without the ego she would expect from a billionaire used to giving orders. But it was the nights that really changed everything. 3 weeks after the wedding, Nathan had returned from a 2-day business trip to London. Sarah had waited up for him, though she wouldn't admit to herself why. When he arrived at the apartment at 11 at night, she was in the living room, reading a book she couldn't concentrate on. "You didn't need to wait up for me," he said, setting his briefcase aside. There was exhaustion in his eyes, and Sarah noticed how he discreetly leaned against the counter for a moment. "Are you okay?" she asked, closing the book. "Just a little tired. Long flight." But Sarah had learned to read the signs, the way he discreetly massaged his left temple, how his movements were slightly slower than normal, how he blinked more than usual. "Nathan, when was the last time you ate something real?" I don't remember." Sarah stood up, extending her hand to him. "Come on. I'll make something simple." "Sarah, you don't need to." "Come on," she repeated, more firmly. In the kitchen, she prepared a turkey and cheese sandwich and a cup of chamomile tea, while Nathan sat on the high stool at the counter, watching her every movement with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "Why are you doing this?" he asked when she placed the plate in front of him. "Doing what?" "Taking care of me." "That wasn't in the contract." Sarah stopped, her hand still on the counter close to his. "Maybe because some things are more important than contracts." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his gaze. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you." The serious tone of his voice made her stomach contract. "What is it?" "The episodes are getting worse, more frequent. The doctor said it's normal in the disease's progression." He ran his hands through his hair, an admission of vulnerability Sarah rarely saw from him. "Sometimes, I'm afraid time is running out faster than we expected." Sarah felt as if someone had squeezed her heart with an iron fist. Without thinking, she covered his hand with hers. "Then we won't waste a single moment," she said softly. It was that night, when Nathan had another dizzy spell while getting ready for bed, that everything changed. Sarah was brushing her teeth in the adjacent bathroom when she heard a dull thud from the bedroom. She ran out and found Nathan leaning heavily against the dresser, his face pale, struggling to maintain his balance. "Nathan!" She ran to him, wrapping her arm around his waist to support him. "Are you okay?" Just give me a minute," he murmured, closing his eyes and leaning on her. Sarah carefully guided him to the bed, helping him sit down. Their bodies were close, and she could feel the slight tremors running through him. See the effort he was making to maintain control. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she said gently, just as she had said that first night. "Not with me." Nathan opened his eyes, and there was something devastating in the vulnerability she saw there. "Sarah, I don't want you to see me like this. Vague, broken. You're not broken," she interrupted, her hands framing his face. "You're human, and you're fighting something impossible with more courage than anyone I know." They stayed like that for a moment, looking at each other in the silence of the room, lit only by the soft light of the city filtering through the windows. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Nathan tilted his head and kissed her. It wasn't like the chaste kiss from the wedding ceremony. This was deep, needy, full of months of contained tension and feelings neither had dared to name. Sarah's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and she could feel the low groan that escaped his throat. When they separated, both were breathing heavily. "Sarah," Nathan murmured against her lips. This shouldn't." "Shh," she whispered, kissing him again, More softly this time. Don't think. Just feel. What happened next was inevitable and perfect. They made love right there on the bedroom sofa with passion and tenderness. Without rushing, Nathan's touch was reverent, his hands exploring every curve of her body as if she were something precious and fragile. Sarah responded with equal intensity, showing him through every caress that she was there, not out of obligation, but by choice. It was ardent and intimate, full of muffled sighs and whispered promises. When Nathan looked into her eyes while moving inside her, Sarah saw something that both scared and thrilled her. Love. Real, deep, devastating love. Afterward, lying intertwined among tangled sheets, neither said anything, but when Nathan traced lazy patterns on her bare skin, and Sarah nestled closer to his chest, both knew something fundamental had changed. It was no longer about contracts or practical arrangements. It was about something much more dangerous and much more real. 6 weeks after that night that changed everything, Sarah was in the penthouse bathroom at 0 inches the morning, holding a pregnancy test with trembling hands. 2 clear pink lines stared back at her, confirming what her body had been whispering for days. The tender breasts, the subtle morning nausea, the fatigue that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. She was pregnant. She sat on the edge of the marble bathtub, still processing the reality. It was exactly what Nathan wanted, what they had planned. But somehow, it felt surreal. Maybe because, in recent weeks, as their relationship had deepened, she had almost forgotten that the baby was part of an agreement. For her, it had become something more. A family she truly wanted, but would it be the same for Nathan? When she came out of the bathroom, she found him in the kitchen, preparing coffee as had become their morning ritual. He wore only black silk pajama pants, his bare torso revealing the defined muscles she had learned to know intimately. Upon seeing her, his face lit up with that smile reserved only for her. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," he said, approaching to kiss her softly, but when he pulled back, he frowned. "You're pale. Are you feeling okay?" Sarah took a deep breath, the pregnancy test still warm in her closed hand. "Nathan, I need to tell you something." Something in the seriousness of her voice made his expression change instantly. He set down his coffee cup, all his attention focused on her. "What is it?" Wordlessly, Sarah opened her hand. Revealing the test, Nathan looked at the small plastic object for what seemed like an eternity, processing what he was seeing. We're pregnant." "Yes." Nathan's face transformed into an expression of pure joy, a smile that lit up his dark eyes in a way she had never seen before. In one fluid motion, he picked her up by the waist and spun her in the air, laughing in a way that sounded almost young. "Sarah, God, this is incredible." He set her back down, his hands immediately going to her still flat belly. "When? How do you feel? Are you okay? We need to call a doctor. Schedule tests." His reaction was everything Sarah could have hoped for, and more. There was genuine happiness there, excitement, care, but there was something else too. Relief, as if an important box had been checked on his list. "Nathan," she said softly, covering his hands with hers, "I need to know, is this about the baby or about us?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, confusion crossing his features. "What do you mean? Are you happy because you're going to have the heir you wanted, or because we're going to have a child together?" For a moment, Nathan didn't answer, and in that silence, Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. When he finally spoke, his voice was more cautious. "Sarah, the two things aren't mutually exclusive. I want this baby. I want our family. But yes, I'm relieved. This baby ensures my legacy continues, that Caleb inherits nothing, that everything I've worked for won't be wasted." His honesty, though appreciated, cut deeper than Sarah expected. She pulled back slightly, her hands falling from her belly. "I understand. Zara, it's not like that. You know it's not like that." Nathan tried to reach for her, but she took another step back. "What I feel for you is real. What we have is real. Is it? Or am I just a convenient incubator you ended up liking?" The accusation hit Nathan like a slap. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with pain. "How can you say that? After everything we've shared, after how we've been together, after a month and a half of good sex and breakfast?" Sarah shot back, knowing she was being cruel but unable to stop. "Nathan, I don't know anything about you, about your illness, about your treatment, about what's really happening to you. You told me the diagnosis, but when was the last time you saw your doctor? Had tests done? Are you taking any medication? Doing any treatment?" The questions poured out in a torrent, fueled by weeks of repressed worry. You act like the disease doesn't exist, Nathan. Like it's just a minor inconvenience. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, an expression of frustration crossing his face. There's no real treatment, Sarah, just delaying the inevitable. But you're not even trying. It's like you've given up. I haven't given up. I'm here. I'm building something with you. I'm trying to make the most of the time we have left. The time we have left, Sarah repeated, the words bitter on her tongue. It always comes back to that, doesn't it? Your death. Your countdown. And I'm just what? A pleasant distraction before the end? Stop it. Nathan's voice was firm now, with an edge of anger. You know that's not true. Do I? Because from my perspective, it seems like you're keeping entire parts of your life secret. I'm your wife, Nathan, the mother of your child. But I feel like I'm just a well-treated employee. They stood there in the middle of the luxurious kitchen, looking at each other across a chasm that had suddenly opened between them. All the intimacy and connection of the previous weeks seemed to have evaporated, leaving only the original business agreement, naked and cold between them. I don't know what you want from me, Nathan said finally, his voice tired. I want the truth. All of it. I want you to stop protecting me from your illness like I'm a fragile child. I want you to let me into your real life, not just the edited version you think I can handle. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, something struggling behind his eyes. For an instant, Sarah thought he might give in, that he would finally open the floodgates and let her in completely. Instead, he pulled away. I need to go to the office. I have an important meeting. Nathan, congratulations on the baby. Sarah, it's exactly what we wanted. The words sounded formal, distant, as if they were back at the beginning. Two strangers making a business deal. Sarah watched as he left the kitchen, heard the sound of the shower, then the movement of him getting dressed and leaving the apartment. When the door closed behind him, Sarah sat on the kitchen stool where they had shared so many intimate mornings, one hand instinctively going to her belly. Well, baby, she murmured to the silence, it seems Daddy has some intimacy issues. But even as she tried to joke about the situation, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had broken between them that morning. And for the first time since accepting Nathan's proposal, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Over the next 2 weeks, they existed in a strange, formal courtesy. Nathan was attentive, careful, asked about her well-being and the baby. But there was a distance between them that hadn't existed before. An invisible barrier that not even mutual desire seemed able to break. They still slept in the same bed, but didn't touch. Still shared meals, but conversations were superficial. And every night, Sarah lay beside her husband, listening to his breathing in the dark, and wondered if she really knew him, or if he would ever let her truly know him. What started as a suspicion became an obsession during the weeks following the fight. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with Nathan's entire situation. It wasn't just the secrets he kept about his treatment. It was how he seemed, paradoxically, healthier with each passing day. The dizzy spells, which had once been frequent, had become rare. His energy was better, his color more vibrant. For someone with a progressive degenerative disease, Nathan seemed to be improving. It was on a Thursday afternoon, while Nathan was in a meeting that would run late, that Sarah decided to do what she had been considering for weeks. Sitting in the penthouse's home office, with medical files scattered across the mahogany desk, she called Dr. Edward Sterling. Dr. Sterling, this is Sarah Harper, Nathan's wife. I know this might seem strange, but I'd like to schedule an appointment, not for me, about my husband. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Harper, I understand you're concerned, but your husband's medical matters are confidential. I can't discuss, doctor. I'm pregnant with his child. And there are things about Nathan's condition that don't make sense. I need to understand what's happening for our baby's sake. Another pause. Longer this time. What kind of things don't make sense? He seems to be getting better. The symptoms are decreasing, not worsening. For a progressive degenerative disease, is that possible? The silence that followed was deafening. When Dr. Sterling finally spoke, his voice sounded strange, tense. Mrs. Harper, perhaps it would be better if we spoke in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 2? Of course, but, doctor, is there something I should know? Mrs. Harper, we'll talk tomorrow. Sarah hung up the phone with trembling hands. There was something in the doctor's voice, guilt, perhaps, or fear that confirmed her suspicions, that there was much more to the story than Nathan had told her. The next morning, Sarah lied to Nathan, saying she was going for routine prenatal checkups. He kissed her forehead distractedly, murmuring something about important meetings, completely unaware that his wife was about to unearth truths that could destroy everything between them. Dr. Sterling's office seemed different during the day. Less intimidating, more ordinary, but when Sarah was led to his office, the doctor looked like he had aged years since she'd last seen him at the wedding. Mrs. Harper, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. Doctor, I need to know the truth about my husband, about his illness. Doctor, Sterling removed his glasses, cleaning them nervously. Mrs. Harper, what I'm about to tell you this will change everything. Are you sure you want to know? Sarah's heart raced. Yes, your husband isn't sick. He never was. The words hit Sarah like a high-speed train. For a moment, she couldn't process what she had heard. What? What did you say? The diagnosis I gave Nathan 4 months ago was false, made up. He doesn't have any degenerative disease. Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. That's impossible. Why would you lie about something like that? Dr. Sterling stood up, walking to the window with slumped shoulders. Because I was paid to lie. Paid very well. Paid by whom? Caleb Harper. The name hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Caleb, Nathan's brother, the man who would be disinherited if Nathan had a child, the man who had everything to gain from Nathan's belief that he was dying. Explain everything. Dr. Sterling returned to his chair, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world. Caleb approached me 5 months ago, said he needed Nathan to believe he was dying. Offered $2 million for me to falsify tests, create a fake diagnosis, and you accepted. My daughter, she has leukemia. She needed experimental treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. $2 million would pay for everything and secure her future. Tears began to form in the doctor's eyes. I knew it was wrong, but you chose your daughter over my husband. Yes, and I've hated myself for it every day since. Sarah stood up abruptly, beginning to pace around the room. Her mind was racing, processing the devastating implications of what she had just discovered. The symptoms Nathan had, the dizziness, the fatigue, probably stress and anxiety. When you believe you're dying, your body can manifest psychosomatic symptoms, or he hesitated. Caleb may have found other ways to reinforce the illusion. Other ways. Small doses of certain medications can cause dizziness and fatigue without permanent damage. If someone had access to Nathan's food or drink, Sarah felt nausea rising in her throat. Are you suggesting that Caleb was poisoning my husband? I'm suggesting that Caleb is a desperate man with a lot to lose, and desperate men are capable of unthinkable things. Sarah stopped pacing, looking directly at the doctor. I need proof, real tests, documentation that proves Nathan is healthy. I've already prepared everything, Doctor, Sterling said, handing her a thick folder. Real blood tests that I secretly did during Nathan's last appointment. Imaging results. Everything. He's perfectly healthy, Mrs. Harper. There's nothing wrong with him. Sarah took the folder with trembling hands. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before? Because I saw how that man changed after he married you. I saw happiness in his eyes for the first time in years. And I realized that what I did wasn't just killing Nathan emotionally, it was destroying any chance he had of having a real life with you and your daughter. She's still in treatment, but there are other ways to get money, ways that don't involve destroying innocent lives. Sarah opened the folder, looking at tests and results that confirmed what the doctor had said. Nathan was healthy completely, perfectly healthy. There's one more thing, Doctor, Sterling said softly. Caleb didn't act alone. What do you mean? Margaret Harper knew. She financed part of the payment. The final revelation hit Sarah like a hammer. Nathan's mother, the woman who had been so cruel at the wedding, was involved in the conspiracy to make her own son believe he was dying. Why? Because she never approved of Nathan's choices. She wanted him to marry someone from their social circle, to have children with a suitable woman. In her twisted mind, if Nathan believed he was dying, he would make desperate choices that she could later undo. Sarah closed the folder, her mind already formulating what she needed to do. Doctor, will you help me expose this? Yes, it's the right thing to do, even if it means the end of my career, and it probably will. I know, but some things are more important than careers. I learned that watching you and Nathan. When Sarah left the office 2 hours later, she had enough evidence to destroy Caleb and Margaret completely, but she also had the devastating knowledge that her entire marriage, her entire life with Nathan, had been built on a lie. The question now was, what would she do with this truth? And, more importantly, how would Nathan react when he discovered he had been betrayed by the people he trusted most, and that the love of his life had discovered everything without telling him first. Sitting in the back seat of the taxi, taking her home, Sarah placed her hand over her belly, where Nathan's child was growing. A child he had believed he wouldn't live to raise. "Well, baby," she murmured, "it turns out Daddy isn't going to die after all. But when he finds out what we discovered today, it might end up killing us." Sarah spent 3 agonizing days deciding how to tell Nathan about the devastating discovery. 3 days watching the man she loved continue living a lie, seeing him take vitamins he believed were experimental medications, noticing how he unconsciously rationed his time, as if each moment was precious because it was limited. The irony was cruel. Nathan had become a better man, believing he was dying. He had learned to value real connections, to show vulnerability, to love without reservation. How could she destroy that by revealing it had all been an elaborate hoax? It was on a Friday night that the decision was made for her. Nathan was in his home office, working late, as had become his habit in recent weeks. Sarah entered with a cup of chamomile tea, a nightly ritual that had developed between them, and found him staring fixedly at a framed photo on his desk. It was an ultrasound of their baby, taken 2 days earlier. "Thinking about something specific?" she asked softly. Placing the tea beside him, Nathan looked up, a melancholic smile crossing his face, thinking that maybe it's time to start organizing things legally, financially. "I want to make sure you and the baby will be protected." "Nathan, are you feeling worse?" "The symptoms?" "No. Actually, I'm feeling good, better than I have in months." He leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "Maybe it's the calm before the storm. Or maybe it's because I finally have something real to fight for." Guilt hit Sarah like a wave. Here was her husband, planning his own death, organizing the future of a family he believed he wouldn't live to enjoy. And she had the proof in her hands that it was all a cruel lie. "Nathan," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to show you something." Before he could respond, his phone rang. It was Simon, calling from the building's reception. "Mr. Harper, sorry to bother you so late, but your brother is here. Says it's urgent." Nathan frowned. Caleb rarely visited unannounced, and never so late. "Send him up." "Nathan," Sarah said urgently, "before he gets here, I need to." But the elevator was already coming up, and minutes later, Caleb Harper entered the apartment. At 35, he had the same bone structure as Nathan, but where Nathan radiated strength and control, Caleb seemed nervous, agitated. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, and there was a frantic energy about him that made Sarah instinctively back away. "Nathan, good to find you home." Caleb hugged his brother with exaggerated enthusiasm. "How are you feeling?" "Better, I hope." "I'm fine, Caleb. What brings you here so late?" "Oh, brotherly concern." And he looked at Sarah with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I wanted to get to know my sister-in-law better. We haven't had a chance to talk properly yet." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. There was something in Caleb's tone, in the way he looked at her, that suggested he knew more than he should. "Sarah, dear," Caleb continued, "I heard you made an interesting visit to Dr. Sterling this week." The world stopped. Nathan looked between his wife and his brother, confusion evident on his face. "What are you talking about?" Sarah felt her heart race. How did Caleb know about her visit to the doctor? Unless he was watching her, or... "Oh, it seems our little songbird hasn't told her husband about her discovery yet," Caleb said, his voice taking on a poisonous note. "How disappointing." "Sarah, I thought honesty was important to you." "Caleb," Nathan said, his voice taking on a warning tone, "stop playing games. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your wife finding out that you're not dying, brother. That you never were." The words fell into the room's silence like bombs. Nathan went completely still, his eyes moving from Caleb to Sarah and back. "What did you say?" "You heard right. There's no degenerative disease. No death sentence. It was all, how can I put it, a very convincing performance." Sarah saw the exact moment understanding hit Nathan. She saw his expression change from confusion to shock, then to a cold, devastating anger she had never seen before. "Sarah," his voice was dangerously low, "is this true?" Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "Nathan, I wanted to tell you. I was trying to find the right way." "Is it true?" he repeated, each word like a sharp blade. "Yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stood slowly, his hands braced on the desk as if he needed support. "How long have you known?" 3 days. 3 days. Nathan repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. "For 3 days, You watched me believe I was dying, organize our future, worry about leaving you alone. And you knew it was a lie. I didn't know how to tell you. I was trying to protect you. Protect. Nathan's explosion of anger made Sarah step back. You let me live a lie for 3 days. You let me. Oh, this is rich, Caleb interrupted, clearly enjoying the drama. The angry husband because his wife lied to him. What delicious irony. Nathan turned to his brother, and Sarah could practically see the moment all the pieces fell into place in his mind. You, he said softly, but there was deadly threat in the quietness of his voice. You did this? Me? I didn't do anything but facilitate some truths. Truths? Nathan lunged at Caleb with a speed that surprised them both. In seconds, he had his brother pressed against the wall, one hand at his throat. You made me believe I was dying. You manipulated my entire life. Nathan, stop, Sarah screamed, fearing he might actually hurt Caleb. Why? Nathan roared, his face inches from Caleb's. Why would you do this? Caleb, even with Nathan's hand at his throat, managed to smile. Because you always had everything. Always. And I was tired of waiting for the scraps. The inheritance? This was all about the inheritance? Partly, but also because I wanted to see you suffer like I suffered my whole life, living in your shadow. Nathan released Caleb in disgust, as if touching him contaminated him. How did you do it? How did you convince Dr. Sterling? Money, dear brother. Lots of money and a little emotional blackmail about his sick daughter. Caleb adjusted his tie, regaining his composure. Though I must admit, the subtle poisoning part was my idea. Small doses of substances that caused the symptoms you expected. Very creative, don't you think? Sarah saw Nathan stagger as if he'd taken a physical blow. You poisoned me. Just enough to make the performance convincing. Nothing permanent, of course. I'm not a monster. Not a monster. Nathan turned to fully face his brother. You manipulated my entire life. Made me believe I was dying. Made me make desperate decisions. Like marrying some random waitress for an heir. The insult directed at Sarah was the last straw. Nathan hit Caleb with a punch that sent him back against the wall, this time with enough force to leave him dazed. Never, Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. Speak about my wife that way again. Caleb touched his bleeding lip, his smile finally disappearing. Hit a nerve, didn't I? But tell me, brother, if you had known you weren't dying, would you still have married her? Would you still have needed that business transaction? The question hit its intended target. Nathan went still, and Sarah saw doubt cross his face. A doubt that cut through her heart like a knife. That's it, Caleb said, stepping away from the wall. Isn't it? You don't know. Because all of this, the marriage, the baby, even this great love, it was all built on a lie that I created. Sarah saw the moment Nathan broke, not physically, but something inside him shattered. He looked at her with an expression of complete devastation. I need air, he murmured, walking toward the door. Nathan, wait. Sarah ran after him, but he was already in the elevator. I need to think. I can't. The elevator doors closed, leaving Sarah alone with Caleb. Well, Caleb said, wiping blood from his lip, that was fun, but I'm sure you'll get through this. After all, there's so much true love between you. Sarah turned to him, and for the first time in her life, she felt pure, burning hatred. Get out, she said quietly. As you wish. But, Sarah, dear, remember, you may have discovered my little secret, but now you and Nathan will have to live with the consequences. And will you ever be able to be sure that what you have is real, and not just a product of my little creation? After Caleb left, Sarah stood alone in the silent apartment, one hand over her belly where Nathan's child was growing. Outside, somewhere in the city, her husband was trying to process the revelation that his entire life had been manipulated by his own brother. And for the first time since discovering the truth, Sarah wondered if revealing everything had been the right decision, because now it wasn't just about Nathan finding out he wasn't dying. It was about them discovering whether the love they had built was strong enough to survive the lies it had been built upon. Nathan didn't come home that night or the next. Sarah spent 2 hellish days wandering the apartment like a ghost, alternating between anger, despair, and a paralyzing fear that she had lost the man she loved forever. Simon called every few hours with updates. Nathan was fine. He was at a hotel. He needed time, but no information about when or if he would return. It was on the morning of the 3rd day that Sarah woke up with strange cramps and light bleeding that sent her running to the hospital in absolute panic. 3 hours later, after tests and monitoring, doctors assured her that the baby was fine. It was just stress, but she needed rest and emotional peace. "Do I need to call your husband?" The nurse asked gently, noticing that Sarah had arrived alone. He's traveling," Sarah lied. Unable to explain that her husband had disappeared after discovering his entire life was a lie. But Simon must have been informed by his contacts at the hospital, because when Sarah returned to the apartment, Nathan was there. He was sitting in the living room, still wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago, his hair disheveled, stubble shadowing his face. When she entered, he stood immediately, his eyes examining her from head to toe. "The baby," were his first words, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Is it fine?" It was just stress. The relief that crossed Nathan's face was so intense that Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. Any doubt she might have had about his feelings for the baby, for their child, dissipated in that moment. "Sarah," he began, then stopped, running his hands through his hair. "I'm sorry for disappearing, for leaving you alone when you needed me." "Nathan, no, let me speak first, please." He walked to the window, looking out at the city stretching below them. "For the past 3 days, I've gone through my entire life, trying to understand what was real and what was Caleb's manipulation. And you know what I discovered?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I discovered it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why we got married. Doesn't matter what my original motivations were. What matters is what we built together. What I feel for you." He turned to face her, and there was a clarity in his eyes she hadn't seen in weeks. "Sarah, I love you. Not because I believed I was dying. Not because you're carrying my child, but because you're the strongest, most real, most incredible person I've ever met. When I thought I might lose you and the baby, when Simon called me about the hospital, I realized nothing else mattered. Not Caleb's lie, not how we started, not how many years I have ahead, only that I want to spend all of them with you." Sarah felt tears flowing freely down her face now. "I love you too, and I'm sorry for not telling you immediately about what I discovered. I was trying to protect you, but I know it was wrong. You were trying to be kind, just like you always are." Nathan crossed the room, stopping in front of her. "Sarah, can I start over? Can I propose to you properly this time?" Before she could answer, he was kneeling before her, taking her hands in his. "Sarah Thornton Harper, will you marry me? Not for a contract, not out of necessity, but because you love me and want to build a real life with me." "Yes," she whispered, kneeling down to his level. "Yes, I do." When they kissed, it was different from all their previous kisses. It was a beginning, a promise, a future unfolding between them. 2 weeks later, Nathan had taken decisive action against Caleb and Margaret. The final confrontation took place in the Harper Enterprises boardroom, with Caleb, Margaret, the board of directors, and a team of lawyers present. Sarah stood beside Nathan, her silent but supportive presence as he presented devastating evidence of the conspiracy. "Caleb Harper and Margaret Harper," Nathan said, his voice cold and formal, "conspired to make me believe I was dying through fraudulent medical diagnosis and systematic poisoning. I have complete evidence of bank transfers, conversation recordings, and Dr. Sterling's testimony." The silence in the room was absolute. Caleb was pale but defiant. Margaret looked like she had aged a decade. "As a result," Nathan continued, "Caleb is immediately removed from all company positions and disinherited. All shares and benefits are revoked. Margaret is cut from the will and banned from any family property." "Nathan, darling," Margaret tried, "you can't believe that I have recordings, Mother, of you and Caleb planning how to correct my life choices after I died." The pain in Nathan's voice was evident. "You wanted me to die believing I was sick. That's unforgivable. And if we refuse?" Caleb challenged. "Then the evidence goes to the police, and you'll face criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning." Nathan leaned forward. "Your choice." Caleb and Margaret left the meeting in defeat, their careers and reputations in ruins. Dr. Sterling, who had cooperated fully, lost his medical license but avoided criminal charges. 6 months later, little Ethan Harper's first cry echoed through the hospital's private suite, announcing the arrival of a new generation. Nathan held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face, whispering promises of love and protection. "He's perfect," Sarah murmured, "watching father and son together, just like his mother," Nathan replied, kissing her forehead. A year later, they moved to a property in rural South Carolina, a spacious country house, surrounded by gardens that Sarah designed, and fields where Ethan could run when he grew up. Nathan had delegated most of the company's daily management, choosing to be present for every milestone of his son's life. Olivia graduated valedictorian of her class and was accepted to Harvard on a full scholarship. In her graduation speech, she thanked her sister, who sacrificed everything to give me a chance, and my brother-in-law, who proved that true families are formed by choice, not blood. On a warm summer evening, 2 years after the truth was revealed, Sarah found Nathan on the porch swing, watching Ethan play on the lawn with the golden retriever they had adopted. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling beside him. "How the best thing in my life came from the worst thing anyone ever did to me," Nathan replied, wrapping her in his arms. "If Caleb hadn't lied, I never would have looked for you, never would have discovered what really matters. Do you think you would have noticed me if we had met under normal circumstances?" Nathan looked at her, his dark eyes full of certainty. "Sarah, I would have noticed you in any life, under any circumstances. Some people are meant to find each other, even without marriage contracts and fake diagnoses, especially without them." As the sun set over their new life, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Sarah nestled closer to her husband, watching their son play in the garden they had created together. It was a life neither had planned, born from lies and desperation, but transformed into something more beautiful and real than any fairy tale. "I love you, Nathan Harper," she murmured against his chest. "I love you, Sarah Harper," he replied, kissing the top of her head. Forever. And for the first time in their lives, both Sarah and Nathan were absolutely certain that forever was exactly what they would have. Sometimes, the greatest truths are born from the cruelest lies. Nathan discovered he didn't need to be dying to learn how to truly live. He just needed to find someone who loved him for who he really was, not for what he owned. Sarah proved that true love doesn't need contracts or guarantees, just two people willing to choose each other every day. Together, they transformed a painful hoax into the beginning of a real family, built on honesty, passion, and the certainty that some loves are strong enough to survive any storm, because sometimes all someone needs is to be seen, loved, and chosen not out of desperation, but from a genuine desire to build something eternal,